Welcome back to Vaguely Adults. You got one of your hosts, Sarana here, and
Shirley, hello.
there's new things. First of all, we missed last week. Oops, that happened. Second of all, if you're watching, I don't have like 3/4 of my hair anymore, so that's a thing. And today we're basically just gonna be rambling about failure, because it do be happening sometimes, you know. Failure is one of those things where you don't necessarily like to talk about it because it's almost shameful in a way, but we want to spin that to be like failure is one of the most beneficial things that you can experience in your life. Alongside all the successes, failure is pretty much what shapes you to, be who you are. So what are some of your examples of failures in life? We're going to start off real easy.
I have too many. I think it's important to know what failure means to everyone, because failure to you is different than failure to me. Failure to me is not being able to do something on the first go. Like, I'll pick up a new hobby, and I fail at a lot of hobbies, which it's a hobby, you can't really fail at it, but in my mind, I can't. Because I didn't get it right the first time. I watched the video and I couldn't do it right away. So therefore I failed at that hobby. And I've gone through crocheting, knitting, sewing, making friendship bracelets, like the braided bracelets, DIYing home projects. I lump all those into one as one of my failures because I cannot do any of them. And if you go into my room, there are boxes and bags full of yarn and threads and markers and paints and notebooks because I've tried it and I have not succeeded on the first go, and therefore I've deemed them failures, and now I have all these supplies for when I eventually try to pick it up again.
Failure to me is, I have seen it mostly as an academic progression, time bar. Early failures for me were the times I didn't get into the schools I wanted. So in high school, I didn't get into the high school I wanted, and I spent 1 year being miserable in a place that I absolutely hated. And then I transferred. So that was a failure that turned into a success, kind of. But, high school is where I met some of my lifelong friends who, are still very close to me to this day. Well, save for the pandemic, and we didn't talk for 9 months and stuff like that. But then the same thing happened to college, university. I applied to Baruch and I didn't get in. So I ended up going, to another one for a year, and then I applied for a transfer, and then I got into Baruch for the 3 years. I realized that I've never committed to anything for more than 3 years. From academics to careers, it's just an interesting thing I realized while being introspective. Retrospective? Introspective?
Introspective.
Okay, yeah, there we go. But, I've also failed in not threading the needle in my first attempt, and flipping a coin and having a 50-50 and guessing the wrong 50,
Yeah.
But
There's different levels of failure. One of the biggest failures for me is not having a career or not having a job in the field that I studied. For me is a failure. Because to start off, I went to a business school and was didn't know it was a business school when I got in. I'm not gonna lie. I was completely ignorant. It was the best out of the CUNYs that I got into, and I was just yeah, okay, I guess I'll go here. Then I got there and everyone, the age-old question, what's your name? Fun fact, what are you gonna major in? And I was one of the last people to go because they started from the back and I always sat in the front because your girl was blind. And everyone's yeah, accounting or international business or finance. And all these people, 90% of the class had accounting. And my professor made a joke and he was two of you maybe will graduate in accounting. The rest of you find new career paths. But when it got to me, I was just oh damn, well everybody already knew and everybody was some kind of business major. So I just made something up on the fly and I was yeah, international business. That is what I'm here to study. And then that's what I started studying because I was well, I already said it in class, so this is my life now. And took all the prereqs for Zicklin. Hated my life, hated all the business classes. Switched to psychology. Actually really liked it. So my first failure at a major put me on to one that I actually really enjoyed. Graduated with it. There wasn't much diversity in the classes because I went to a business school and the last thing that they were trying to do was up the liberal programs, and that turned into success. But then I graduated and now I work in eye care. So success or failure, unsure. I enjoy my job now, But it would be nice to eventually go back to what the original plan was, although not 100% sure what that is either, to be honest.
It's funny because I also started in international business, like intended to do that, you know. But I started off as a pre-engineering major when I went to the first college because I was really set on doing engineering because I loved physics. I still love physics. I fell for it when I almost failed physics in high school. It was a very big learning experience because that was one of the first times I experienced almost failure. I passed the class. I made a deal with my teacher in high school. It was like, hey, if I do really well on the Regents, which is like a standardized test that we take here, if I do really well, would you replace my grade with my Regents score? And so I was getting like a 45 in the class, and then I crammed for like 3 days straight. Like, I barely slept. I think I was averaging 2 or 3 hours a night during Regents time. I got an 85 on the Regents, so I got 85 overall in the class. I know. And now I don't remember a single thing in physics, you know? Except momentum and gravity and, you know, stuff like that. But full intent to go into engineering, because then I went to that first college and they didn't have an engineering track, so it was like general requisites and whatever, and I was like, alright, I'm not going to waste my time doing this. So, you know, transferred, went to business school, started off undecided, as one does, then learned about international business. And I thought that was amazing because it allows you to get jobs in other countries and it kind of puts you on a path to international relations if that's something you wanted to study in your master's and stuff like that. I averaged it out and I would have had to stay an extra year in college. That's not something I wanted to do. I was very set on graduating in, you know, the 4-year time frame. So I switched to finance for a hot second because I was like, all right, I joined this club and everyone is doing accounting, finance. Sure, I could do that.
You became a finance bro, yeah.
Hated it. Hated every second of it. Almost failed out of the business school. Had to have one of my classes drop because I was going to get a D in the class, which is still passing. Listen, D's and C's get degrees, right? After you graduate, your GPA barely matters unless you're going straight out of school into, like, an accounting firm or, like, one of these big firms that,
or grad
you know,
school, yeah.
Or grad school, yeah. Wasn't floating my boat. So I was like, okay, let's do another kind of business. And I kind of fell into marketing because it was still in the business school, but it also averaged out so that I would graduate on time. Dipped my toes in it. I was really good at it, if I do say so myself, advertising and marketing, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. And then once I kind of fell into the film minor, which, by the way, I did that in 1 semester. I took an entirely new minor in 1 semester, my graduating semester at that. Yeah, I don't know how I did it either, but all those failures put me on this thing to be like, no, I want to create stuff. I want to help, you know, tell stories that haven't been told, and that's, like, my core belief. And it's why, like, you know, we started this podcast, and I know we get into that all the time, but, you know, hearing voices like ours, seeing faces like ours, it's very important at a time like this when the world's on fire and no one knows what's going on and people are very confused as to what they want to do and stuff like that. So I would say, like, these failures throughout life kind of narrow down what I don't like, and it helped me kind of figure out, okay, so I'm good at these things, and if I have to do it, I can still do it, but it's not necessarily what I'm gonna, you know, dedicate my whole life to. Long-winded way of saying I'm very picky and I say no to a whole lot of things. I mean, there's also a sense of solidarity when you're in group settings or things that make you feel like you're suffering, because there was nothing like those accounting classes and finance classes where everyone's just like, we have a final and the average of the last test was a 29. It just hits in a different way. Failures. What can you do?
I mean, yeah. It's hard, but it also, like, I'm not gonna lie, like, the people that I work with are one of the many successes in my life. I love all of them, the people that I work with. I've met some really cool people through the different stores that I've worked at that I still talk to, that are pretty chill, that have also, like, opened me up to new things. I had one coworker, Michelle, and we got really close when we worked in the same store, and she would just take me out to eat, like, every week. Like, we were going somewhere different, trying all the food, going to museums and that kind of thing, and it was really dope and it was really nice and, like, opened me up to things that I would not have done otherwise. Coworkers from, like, all different kinds of backgrounds. We have coworkers that grew up in the suburbs and now live in the city or grew up in other states. I had one who was from Arkansas, and his life sounded like a movie. He came here, he was like poor white boy, like literally no money in his pocket kind of thing, backpacked to New York with his friends with $20 in his pocket or something like that, and met pretty dope people along the way. Ended up living in, like, the projects, like very dangerous projects. Like, so imagine, like, this super skinny blonde lanky white boy just, like, in the middle of, like, the projects, and became friends with the people there. And he talked about it. He was like, yeah, there was this, like, one Jamaican woman who was, like, the like the mom of the block, and she was just like, yeah, like that's my white boy, like that's my snowflake, like nobody touch him, nobody mess with my white boy. And like she would feed him and take care of him and all that good stuff. And then he ended up going to school and he ended up getting married, and he was working with me, and then at the same time he was in a grad program. He had like 3 bachelor's and 2 associate's degrees, all in very different things, literature, philosophy, I don't remember the other things, but like his life was bizarro. And like every day he had a new story, and it was really cool. Maybe working, if I had gone straight into grad school instead of working where I work now, I wouldn't have met all these different kinds of people. I wouldn't have met, and they've all somehow shaped my life. Like every person that comes into your life will somehow shape your life, whether you know it or not, whether they know it or not. Small decisions. All that to say, I'm very grateful for the people in my life, even the ones who've done me dirty. It's taught me lessons.
It's interesting because I think, if you're asked the question, if you were to go back, would you do it any differently? I honestly don't think I would. I mean, yeah, I could have started investing earlier. I could have, started learning about these things earlier because I did go to business school. And now I feel like I'm starting late with a lot of these adult decisions and stuff like that. But had I not failed out of a class, I wouldn't have met people in my summer finance classes. Had I not transferred to a new school, I wouldn't have met one of these professors who, she doesn't know it, but to this day shaped my perspective, because she was one of the first queer professors that I've had ever in my life. And I'm sad that I lost touch with her, but it was a theater course during a summer, and it was a very interesting mix of people. It was from super seniors who were just trying to get their last credit to graduate to, freshmen trying to get ahead of the game. And she created an atmosphere where it was very open and there was no judgment, and we were reading scripts and acting things out. And I want to say it was the first taste of creativity isn't limited to theater kids, and it's applied across the board. And it's also that we were in kind of like cohorts and groups, and whilst we didn't know anything about like theater basics, we all were helping each other. So you don't need to necessarily be an expert to help someone else. Whatever knowledge you have as a beginner, you can help other beginners. And that was one of the key lessons that I walked away from in 2015 when I took that class. And it's something that stayed with me for how many years now? 6 years?
Yeah.
But you'd never really know what or who can make an impact on you and what lessons that stay with you forever.
Dude, honestly, yeah. I hadn't even thought about it in that way. Like, as a beginner, you can still teach people things. In my job, so I'm currently an apprentice at my job. So I am in an apprenticeship program. So on route to get licensed to become an optician. And they, obviously there are people there who have been doing it for years. Like my boss, he's been doing it for like 10 or 11 years. I have my mentor who's been doing it for 2 years, licensed, but she was also in the program. That's how she got into it. And I work with other opticians and stuff like that have been doing it for a long time. And even then, sometimes, like, we'll help each other. Like, I'm just a beginner. But I've seen, like, you see certain things or you work with certain people and you learn from other people. And then I sometimes help my boss with things. That's what I'm trying to say. It's a long-winded way of me saying my boss asks for help. And this is a man who's been doing things for 11 years. And I used to be scared to ask for help because I'm like, well, I don't want them to see me as a failure. Like, well, oh, she doesn't know this. Like, this isn't some innate knowledge in her that she was born with, which is ridiculous to think because these people have been doing this for years. Some of them their whole lives. This is their career. And they are okay with asking for help. So why shouldn't I be okay with asking for help? It doesn't make me a failure to need help. On the contrary, knowing when to ask for help, I think, is a success. Because you can't know everything. You can't do everything. And that is a lesson that I learned through work.
In conclusion, the key takeaways from this conversation is, even if you're a beginner, you can help other beginners. The only person stopping you from sharing your knowledge is yourself. Sometimes you know things that other people don't, and it's those fun facts that can make or break someone's day. You can teach them something new. Failure is not necessarily something that you should broad over or be like, oh man, I didn't get it that time. You can always try again. Like, this is my 3rd or 4th time trying some sort of venture like this. Like, way back in early college, I started a YouTube channel with one of my best friends. It didn't go anywhere, but back then I had a friend who was really into graphic art, and she even made like banners and icons and stuff for us. And I think if you search hard enough, you can probably find it, but I'm not gonna link it or do anything. But, trying and trying again doesn't necessarily mean that you're not good at it. It just takes the right timing as well. So,
yes, ma'am.
With all that being said, thanks for always listening to us rambling. Remember that failures aren't the end-all be-all. And we failed last week, not putting up an episode, but, we're here
yes,
this week, so always stay safe, stay hydrated, get vaccinated if you can, and we'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for watching.
Vaguely adult. Things are just vaguely adult.